and welcome to the fourth session of the Performing Arts. Take a moment to locate your nearest emergency exit, and out of respect for the artists on stage as well as the other audience members, turn off your cell phones now, and please, no texting during the show. As mandated by federal copyright law, any form of unauthorized recording or photography is strictly prohibited. There will be no intermission. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Good evening, welcome to my lecture recital. As it's written on that title, on the slide, and as you may have seen, right now something strange is happening, and that is I've been playing the clarinet with the reed on top instead of the bottom. The piece that I just played, as you can see from your program, is Sonata for Clarinet and Basso Continuo, written by Gregorio Sciroli. He was a composer from Naples, and he worked in the 18th century. So the choice of this composer is not casual. I've chosen him because, as we can see during my, my lecturing, Sciroli was working in Naples in a period in which Neapolitan clarinet players were playing with the reed on top. So what I'm doing is not something that I invented, but is something that existed at a certain point in time during clarinet history, and at another point in time was abandoned for some reasons that we are going to deal with. So the purpose of this research, and this lecture too, is to find out if this way of playing that was abandoned, so we can consider it obsolete right now, has still any kind of use, is useful today or not. And if it is useful today, what is the meaning of doing that in the 21st century? And there are some ways I can see this being useful. For example, it may improve the awareness of historically informed players or regular players. I make this distinction about these two categories of players because they will have different benefits from it. On the one hand, we have historically informed players. They usually play with early reproduction of early instruments, and they try to play the same way instrumentalists of the past were playing, recreating the same conditions. On the other hand, we have modern players like me that have to perform in normal settings, and they're also educators. So another point of this research is to see if this technique can be used in education, for educational purposes. But before getting into this, let's do a little bit of history. So, some of the sources that we have about this are just pictures, paintings. In this case, we have a painting that is dating 1722. The clarinet was invented during the last decade of the 17th century. So this picture, this painting dates more or less 25 years after the clarinet's invention. Which means that in Germany, because this painting is German, right after the clarinet was invented, somebody was playing with the reed on top, as we can see in this picture. In this other picture, which still comes from Germany, we can see the same thing as the reed is upwards, but this painting dates a little bit more recently. So we can infer that this practice was used for an extended period of time. And then changing geographical location, we have this other painting that dates significantly more recently in the 19th century, in the second half of the 19th century. And this is located in the south of Italy. This is a group of street players that would play for a celebration of in a small town in which they celebrate the appearance of the Virgin Mary, and they do it every year in the month of September. And this clarinet player also is playing with the reed under his upper lip. Now, this is probably the most significant picture if we speak academically, because this comes from a method book. And the method book this method book was written by Ferdinando Sebastiani, who was professor of clarinet in the Conservatory of Naples in the 19th century. He also played in the orchestra of Teatro San Carlo in Naples. So he was a professional player. And this picture, which shows a clarinet player, probably himself, that's a self-portrait, playing with the reed on top, comes from the chapter called How to Hold the Clarinet. So he really instructed his students to play it this way. So as we are opening this topic about Ferdinando Sebastiani, it's time for me to play a piece written by him, which is the second piece in the program. This piece is not standard repertoire for clarinet. But since it was written by himself in a period, it's an opera fantasy. So you can hear melodies from Donizetti operas. These kind of pieces usually were played by the composer himself. So I'm almost sure that this piece, when it was performed the first time, it was performed with the reed on top. this person, his musical environment, his composition, and a little bit of his biography and how his music sounds, we can delve into his reasoning about the reed above embouchure. He made a very straightforward reasoning. So if this is the mouthpiece, this is the reed, and this is our mouth system, the strongest part of our mouth is the upper jaw, because it's fixed, we cannot move it. Instead, the lower part is weaker because it's movable. In the mouthpiece, that's the opposite. The reed is the weakest part because it's very thin and flexible, and the mouthpiece is the thicker part. So his combination was, let's put the weakest part of the clarinet equipment in contact with the strongest part of our oral system, and the strongest part of our mouthpiece, of our clarinet equipment, in contact with the weakest part of our oral system. This is his basic reasoning. Other than that, he thought that tonguing was better this way because the tongue is attached to the lower part of our mouth and our throat, and it's easier to move it upwards than downwards. The last reason was that if the reed is on the upper side, it has more space to vibrate, and it can produce a bigger sound and project better in bigger rooms. Now, it seems perfect. Why don't people play like this anymore? Because Sebastiani was not the only instructor in the clarinet world in the 19th century, and the Neapolitan school of clarinet, it's historically very important, but it was not the only school back then. So let's introduce other people here. Closet, his full name was Hyacinthe Eleanor Closet. He is one of the most important clarinet instructor in history. He was French. He was professor of clarinet in Paris. He left a lot of music to us and a lot of instructional books, etudes, and an actual method of clarinet. In his method of clarinet, we don't see this on the American edition, but if we go to the French edition, the first one that was published, he actually talks about this topic. He never mentions the reed above embouchure, but he strongly advocates the reed below embouchure, which means if one excludes the other, he knew about these two. He talks about the advantages of the reed below position. And the first advantage that he sees is that the reed below position allows the player to have a sweeter sound, a sound that is more pleasant to our ears. Also, he thinks that since the tongue is attached to the lower part of the mouth, it makes more sense to have the reed in the same spot so that it's easier to reach the reed with this movement rather than this movement. So if I move it back in the traditional position, the tongue is here, and according to Closet, it's easier to make this movement. Finally, he thinks that the posture of the instrumentalist playing with the reed below position is more graceful and less tiring than this position. Now, before deciding what's best, he's not the only other person that I want to mention, because another important school of clarinet in the 19th century was the German school of clarinet. And let's see what happens in Germany. Down with the reed to the underlip. That's a direct quotation from Karl Baermann's method book. So why is this important? If he's so strong about this topic, if he feels so strongly, that means that somebody in Germany was also playing the other way. So even if I don't have other method books like Sebastiani that tell us to play with the reed on top, having somebody that strongly advocates the opposite means that they were aware of that position and that somebody in Germany was also playing like that. So it's an indirect indication that something similar was going on in Germany too. And also Baermann is very precise about why we should put the reed on the bottom lip. It's because every note in the clarinet has a slightly different embouchure that we should adapt and a slightly different voicing. It's way easier to do that with the lower jaw because the lower jaw has more sensitivity than the upper jaw that is completely fixed. In his opinion, it's basically impossible to play in a musical way, in a refined way, with the reed on top. Now, historically, Closet and Baermann seem to be right, because that's the way everybody plays now. I do think the Baermann claim, however, has a weakness, because while he's right that the upper jaw is fixed and has less control, that does not really apply to the lip. We can still move our lip and control that using our lip muscle. Am I saying that we should play like that? No, but this point about the lip control will become important in the next part of my presentation. So please keep this in mind. Before going on, I would like to play with a regular embouchure and a movement from the Clarinet Quintet number 5, written by Baermann himself. And this is Adagio by Baermann, and is originally written for Clarinet Quintet, but I'm playing it with a piano reduction. Steven Brancaleone is another doctoral student of piano performance in the studio of Dr. Steinberg. So, thank you, Steven. Now we've seen a side that advocates the read above embouchure and two sides that advocate the opposite. Let's see if we can find more examples of read above embouchure, especially in a more recent epoch. Here we have a video, which means that this performance is more recent than the ones that we analyzed from other historical sources. And the performance that I will play right now is an excerpt, a clarinet solo, E-flat clarinet solo from Bolero by Ravel. And it's performed by the Radio Television Symphony Orchestra in Italy called RAI. And the clarinet player is Raffaele Annunziata, who died around 20 years ago. So we're talking about more or less contemporary clarinet playing. Other than Maestro Raffaele Annunziata, who, by the way, used to play with the read above only E-flat clarinet. He would play normally when playing B-flat clarinet and saxophones. This is why I think this depends on the weight of the instrument, because as we were seeing the posture to play with the read above, the clarinet needs to be held higher, which means that your body is going to feel more the weight of the instrument. E-flat clarinet is smaller, so probably this issue is less evident when playing E-flat clarinet. But we have another example of this, which is Ferdinando Busoni. He was a clarinet professor and performer between the 19th and 20th century. His son was way more famous than he is, because he was an important composer. Ferruccio Busoni, usually pianists know him for his transcriptions of Bach music for piano. Anyway, Ferdinando Busoni advocates the read above embouchure, like Sebastiani, but for different reasons, which sound like the opposite. Busoni says that the weakest part of the mouth is the most sensitive part. The only thing is that he identifies the upper lip as the weakest part of the mouth. So his reasoning is opposite from Sebastiani's reasoning, but he goes to the same conclusion, to play with the reed on top, to have a better articulation of sound and a better overall control of the instrument. But now I made some examples. It's very tiring playing this way, so I made very small videos so that I wouldn't feel tired while doing that, of playing the same excerpt, read above and read below. This is an excerpt from a concerto for clarinet of the early clarinet life, written by Franz Krommer. Now we have the exact same excerpt played with a regular embouchure. And now a very common excerpt that clarinet players play in auditions, which is first movement of Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, Pastorale, and I did the same experiment. I played it before with reed above embouchure, and then again the same excerpt with the reed below. Oh, there is a problem here. I think I uploaded the wrong video in this slide. Let's try this one. It's all the same video, so I'll just do it live. Everybody knows this excerpt, so when I play with the reed above embouchure, it should give a sound that's more similar to the early clarinet, while with the reed above, it should sound more like we are used to. After this comparison of the two ways of approach the instrument in a single excerpt so that we can actually compare how the same music sounds one way or the other, now I think we're opening the most interesting part of this research, that is, okay, all of this is beautiful, we can play two ways, but why we should play in a harder way? What's the point? And now we are going to see the point. So, in order to do that, I would like to call my volunteer, Geneva Maldonado, who is a second-year master student in clarinet performance, and she's going to do an experiment with me. Thank you. So first of all, can you play a middle E long tone, maybe 10 beats for us? Yeah, that one. Okay. Can you try to do the swelling, like piano, forte, piano? Yeah. Okay, she's an advanced student, so she's already sounding good. But let's see if we can improve this somehow using the reed above embouchure. So please switch the embouchure up and try to do exactly the same thing, and it doesn't matter how it sounds right now. How are you feeling playing this way?
I feel like I don't feel as secure with my sound, and it's because it just feels quite odd because I'm not used to playing like that. But my embouchure does feel more relaxed than it did before.
Okay, let's switch back to our regular embouchure. What are your impressions now that you went back to your comfortable position?
I am more aware now of the tension that I have, like on my bottom jaw in terms of biting on the mouthpiece. So it definitely feels like I'm being more relaxed and in return from that, a little bit more space in my oral cavity.
Okay, so let's say that a person had a problem of opening up. This may be a nice remedial option for a quick fix. And then there is something that I hear from here a little bit. Probably people in the back will hear this more. I think that when you switch back, the sound was richer and therefore it projected a little bit better in the back of the room. But from here I can tell just a little bit. It's more evident the farther you go. Now let's play a scale. Like with your regular embouchure, a C major scale is fine, yeah. Largo. Okay. Now let's just switch back. Okay, you may need to do it again, everything a little bit more the instrument.
Okay.
Okay, how does it feel now that we're playing a little bit harder music?
The second time around, it felt a lot better having the angle of the instrument a lot higher. It feels weird to feel the reed vibrating on my top lip versus the bottom. But yeah, it just feels more like there's less tension.
Okay.
Overall.
Let's switch back. How does it feel now? Compared to the first try.
I feel like my sound has a little bit more color to
Okay.
it. And the tone feels more solid and secure and just a little bit more rich.
Okay. Yeah, I perceive some more resonance from here. And I have an idea of why, but before sharing the idea, I would like to retry the same experiment on an articulated scale. So please play the same scale, but staccato. Short. Let's change it. Okay, how does it feel to articulate that way?
It's a little difficult, and it's because I feel like I can't get my tongue to really kind of make contact with the reed in the way that I would want it to, as if they were the other way around.
So you're making a bigger effort to
Yeah.
reach higher in your mouth.
Yes.
Okay, let's switch back and do the same thing. Okay, how do you feel now?
I feel like the position of my tongue did feel a lot higher, and that my tongue was actually kind of making contact with the tip of the reed the way it should, rather than maybe the way I usually do it. I feel like there's maybe a little less movement here.
Do you feel your tongue is closer to the reed?
Yeah.
Okay, there is something nice that just happened. When you played the last note, I felt it resonating also after you played, more than it happened in your first attempt. So, let me share the findings of this experiment. Make way here. And my opinion is that the sound is richer for two reasons. First of all, because playing with the reed on top forces the player to have a higher tongue position, which is one of the most common issues when playing clarinet, that the tongue position is too low. With the reed below position, if the tongue is too low, it may not sound great, but the instrument still plays. So we may just overlook it and just keep going, even if we are not doing it right. While the reed above position doesn't forget, it's going to squeak or the instrument is not going to play at all. So this is one thing. The second thing is that I think that just experimenting this way of playing with reed on top gives our upper lip more sensitivity than we usually have. So even when we switch back, if we apply some engagement, if we engage the upper lip, even if it's not in contact with the reed, the entire embouchure system will be more relaxed, but at the same time more stable. And the sound has more room to expand and bigger dynamics, and it's more resonant. So that's what I think about implementing it. The way to implement it is exactly what you saw in this experiment. You play an excerpt, you don't really like how your embouchure feels in that moment, and just to see if everything is in place, we may switch a moment so that this sort of resets our brain. We find the embouchure and then we switch back. Probably something, we will notice some improvements. Maybe it's not a definitive remedial, but it's something, it's a good tool to check issues, which after all are the issues and the benefits that we can see from this slide. The most common issues in clarinet sound production are actually tongue position, articulation, intonation control, and wind support. What you have just seen doing between me and Geneva has been done with other students. This is part of a bigger case study that I made for my doctoral document. And the people involved in the study are players of different backgrounds, freshmen, sophomores, a professional clarinet player, and also an amateur senior player in his 60s who does a completely different job. He's an orthopedic doctor. So we had a very big pool of players to whom I tried to apply this experiment. And the findings, I will say the findings are very similar to what we've seen with Geneva. The only difference is that with less advanced players, you will notice more difference in sound and in articulation just because there is more room for improvement. Before we go to the conclusion, I actually want to play for you with Geneva a duet that is from Sebastiani method book. So it was an etude that they would play together to practice intonation. But the funny part is that I will play with the reed above embouchure and she will play with the regular embouchure. And we'll try to see if we can blend. So it is time now to wrap all this discussion up and find some conclusions. So from what happened during this lecture and basically what happened also during my entire study, I will conclude that it's not probably worth it to reintroduce the read above embouchure as a standard practice of performance, especially because while I think you can achieve the same results with both embouchures, you probably need to start your clarinet playing that way if you want to be comfortable. It requires some study, which is not very efficient since the majority of players did not start that way. So introducing it to play for no reason, I don't think that's the conclusion of my study. The biggest use that can be done in an actual performance is for historically aware performers who, for certain pieces that were written in a period in which clarinet players in that area would play with the reed above embouchure, they may play that way to recreate the same conditions. However, even in this case, playing regularly, that would not be a historical mistake because there's no period in history in which the reed above embouchure was the only way of playing. Even when players would use that, it would coexist with the other approach to the instrument. So if an historical aware player wants to play with a regular embouchure, that's not an historical mistake. That's up to the player to decide what to do. Regarding modern players, modern performers, I do not think, like I said, to reintroduce it as a regular way of playing. But I think the biggest use we can do is what you've just seen in my experiment as a remedial technique for some issues. And to reach this conclusion, I wanted to test myself, my endurance playing with reed above embouchure, real music, not just a small experiment. And then I concluded that probably the effort that I'm making in holding the instrument so high and control all the lip and put my tongue that high to reach the reed is probably not worth the result. But it needed to be done in order to reach this conclusion. Secondly, I think this is the biggest reason why the embouchure was abandoned, the reed above embouchure was abandoned, and it sort of followed the evolution of the instrument because older instruments did not have all of this key work, were not made of this wood, they were made of boxwood, which is a lighter weight wood. Without all of this metal, the instrument weight was much inferior. So the biggest issue that I have with this embouchure, that is the weight of the instrument on my right arm, would completely go away with ancient instruments. Now, following the evolution of the clarinet, probably more and more players realized that that effort was excessive and the traditional reed below embouchure was just more comfortable. And I agree with this finding. But both instructors and students may want to have the knowledge of this and to know the existence of this embouchure and decide how to apply it, especially as we saw, with remedial purposes and instructional purposes. So after all of this discussion, I would like to thank you for your time, for your attention, and I would also like to open the discussion if there are any questions or curiosity about this topic. I know it's not a very common topic in music, but this may be a good moment to discuss about it, especially if we have, I don't know if we have in the audience, double reed players that engage their upper lip all the time. Thank you. If you don't bite, it's not painful. It may be painful if we already have that issue of overbiting. And actually, feeling pain, that may be a good indication that we are biting too much when playing normally. So this goes in the same direction of, if I'm feeling pain, probably I'm not playing the right way, even when I sound right. Yes, I see a hand.
So you said you engage your upper lip a lot less when using this embouchure, yeah?
Yes.
So do you use like a double lip when you play, or?
Oh yes, I did not specify it, but yes, thank you for your question. When you play with the reed above, it is mandatory to play with a double lip embouchure. When playing with the reed below, double lip embouchure exists, but it's not the most common way of playing. We have some important examples of professional players using the double lip embouchure also normally, but that's not the most common way of playing. So yes, this was a good question. Yes?
When you articulate with the reed up embouchure, where on the mouthpiece do you articulate? Is it still the top?
So I don't know if you can see from there, but when you put the reed on the top, the only way you can articulate if you hit the very tip of the reed, basically the opening, the tip opening between the mouthpiece and the reed. And that's the only way you can reach the reed, because it's not possible to go on the body of the reed. Yes, I see another hand.
If you are only able to hit the tip of the reed, does that make it easier to articulate lightly?
Can you say it again?
If you are only able to hit the tip of the reed when articulating with the reed above embouchure, is it easier to articulate lightly?
It's easier to be very precise in the articulation, because hitting the opening gives a very precise release, almost like a percussive instrument, almost like this. What it is harder is to make a less distinctive articulation, which will be achieved with a lot of exercise, actually hitting the mouthpiece. Hitting the mouthpiece will not stop the sound, but you can still hear some kind of articulation. And it sounds like, the string portato. So violin portato, when they change the bowing direction without interrupting the sound. Yes?
How would you do vibrato? Because I noticed when you played reed down, you used some vibrato, but I didn't hear any vibrato when you had the reed up. Is it harder to do, or is it just?
I think it's probably easier to do vibrato with the reed up, just because we have more room. It may be risky, because then the pitch fluctuation may be too wide. And so the vibrato may sound actually vulgar, because we have a fluctuation of probably half step. That's too much. But that doesn't mean it's probably easier to produce a fluctuation in pitch, but not easier to control it. So if we don't have any other question, I think we can conclude this presentation now. Thank you for your attention again.